Welcome to With Love, the Chambers.
Where life, laughter, and lasting lessons meet.
We're the Chambers, a husband and wife navigating faith, family, and everything in between.
Here we share real stories, heartfelt conversations, and a whole lot of love. Because life isn't perfect, but God's grace sure is.
So pull up a seat, grab a cup of coffee, or go ahead and sip that tea, and join us for honest talks, laughs, and the wisdom we're learning along the way. This is With Love, the Chambers. Welcome to another With Love Wednesday. I am Jamila Chambers.
And I am Rufus Chambers, and we're so excited that you chose to tune in with us today for a very, very special broadcast. Why is it special, Jamila? Help us, help the listeners and viewers understand why this is special today.
Well, a special broadcast because you have been asking us for a number of weeks, when are you going to go on camera? When are you going to allow us to be able to see your faces? And in fact, several times on the podcast, we say, we look forward to seeing you.
All of that.
All the time. We look forward to seeing you back with us. And now today, we are actually able to be seen. Finally able to be seen. So we welcome our audience and we welcome each of you. And we thank you for all of your support, for all of you that have listened, for those of you that have been along the journey with us. We just appreciate you joining us thus far. But we're ready to get into it today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, but before we do, just want to encourage all of the viewers and listeners, hit the like button, hit the share button. Drop a comment on whatever platform that you're viewing from. Help us get in the algorithm so this word and this podcast and this medium can be shared with as many people as possible. Like we've always said, everything that we're doing is not to help ourselves, but is really to help you all and to add value to your life. So just wanted to add that commercial break before we dive into the conversation.
As we should.
Absolutely.
Well, here's today's conversation. And today's conversation really has to do a lot about betting on yourself.
All right.
And I thought it was important for us to talk about that with this being our first time recording this podcast in studio. Okay. Because many people have a dream, have a vision, have something that they want to do, something that they want to go after. Yeah. And sometimes there is paralysis around, I don't have it all together. Yes. I don't have everything I need. I don't have all the resources in place. Yeah. And so instead of starting where we are and starting with what we do have access to, sometimes that paralysis kicks in and we don't start at all. And so I wanted to talk today and encourage the listeners and the viewers now through our story about the importance of betting on yourself. That's and good. Believing in yourself, even when you don't have all of the answers and everything right in place from the beginning.
Absolutely.
So we have had several parts and pieces to our story.
A whole lot.
Several times, and we have shared in this forum before about our background and a little bit about our careers. Yeah. But talk to the listeners and now the viewers about the importance, just starting there with betting on yourself and putting the investment in believing in your dreams.
Yeah, no, this is definitely a timely conversation. Jamila, as you know, 2025 has definitely been a representation of us collectively as a family betting on ourselves, but our journey surely didn't start in 2025. Right. When you say bet on yourself, the first thing I think about is betting on ourselves. It forces us to place a demand on things that are inside of us. It's one thing to live our lives in a place of comfort, apathy, and things just being completely normal, but it's another thing to kind of press beyond what's familiar and see what treasure lies within us. You know, it's funny that when I look back at our corporate careers, you know, for this 25 plus years that we've been working jobs, many of the departments, many of the organizations, many of the bosses that we have worked on, they never had a problem placing a demand on us because they often knew that they can do more than what they're producing for us. You were recently promoted a few years ago on your job, and really that promotion we celebrated, and it was a long time coming, but it also confirmed that there's more inside of Jamila than what she's currently producing. And betting on ourselves gives us the opportunity to turn the table and do that in our own lives. Fun story for me, and you've heard this, is in January of 2023, I was attending a revival at our local church, Center of Hope in Inglewood, California, where Pastor Jeremy Dixon is the lead pastor. And I was there serving. I'm not on program. I'm not there as a speaker, but in that environment, I received an unction that I needed to bet on myself. January of 2023. When I got that unction, when I got that word, in my heart, I wrestled with it for quite some time, right? Because I know what I had heard, but then I also knew all of the financial responsibilities that I had at that current day.
Sure.
Daughters who, in school, they got
brand new
things that they're doing, college,
absolutely.
and, mortgage, car notes, and all these other expenses. So that word that I received, it was like the counterpunch was the reality.
Sure.
So what I did is I stayed put. And I knew, hearing that word, bet on myself, it was really in the area of entrepreneurship, right? And pressing past, fast forward to January of 2025, as you know, I've jumped out.
Sure.
I ventured out, resigned from my job, and went ahead and devoted my full time to our business, the Vision Engineering Collective. And it was about betting on myself, but I share that to share that 2-year duration of time where I was wrestling and vacillating in the in-between. And some of the listeners, they may be going through the very same thing, right? Hearing something, having an unction, but all of this self-doubt and internal chatter, it can really snatch even having the capacity or the courage to step out.
And I want to unpack a couple of things there that you mentioned. And the very first thing is we don't want to despise our beginnings.
Absolutely.
And so wherever we have found ourselves, whether it was in a corporate environment, you and I talk very often about the value of apprenticeship and how when we came up in the time that we came up, that no matter what you did, you had to pay some dues.
Come on now.
And you were expected to pay some dues.
Yes.
And you had no problem paying some dues.
That was the system.
That was the system, and that was what you were taught. And in that paying dues, you got the opportunity to glean from, to learn from, to benefit from others. In the course of that paying dues. And so there was some benefit to that for us. We got to learn and be taught under someone else's system, on someone else's watch, and that benefited us in that way. But I do want to pause and say this, especially to those that are listening.
Come on.
Is that if you don't understand what your dream is and what your vision is, that other people will be very happy to put you to work on theirs.
All day, for the rest of their life.
For the rest of their lives. Like, if you don't understand what it is that you are called to do and destined to do, and really, really pay some time being led in that area, people will very happily have kept us in whatever position or capacity that they found us.
Absolutely.
And so to start there in terms of betting on yourself, how do I know, or how do I go about listening for that inner unction by the leading and guiding of the Spirit? How do I go for, how do I start to look for confirmation in the things that I am doing about what should I be betting on to begin with?
That's good.
How do
That's
I even
good.
begin to have that conversation so I can begin to bet on myself?
That's a great question, and what you and I talk about a lot, as followers of Christ, right? Let's just set that as a context, right? We're having a conversation really within the framework of our faith, and that's being followers of Christ. As a follower of Christ, we always need to make sure that our heart is aligned with the will and the word of God, right? So that's always something. As we come into the faith, as we come into, this followership, right, our discipleship, part of the transformation process, that Romans 12, when our mind is being renewed, is our will and our desires and our wants begin to transition, right, into a place of aligning, right, with the will of God, right, which is the word of God. So let's just say that first, right? And then, part of our devotion time with the Lord, prayer, worship, meditation, studying, journaling, part of that two-way conversation with our Heavenly Father, it's just like the Lord Jesus. He said, when he taught the disciples how to pray, he said, our Father, right? He introduced that to them. That part of prayer is having a conversation with your Father. And in that same model prayer, he talks about thy will being done.
Sure.
So we see us as followers of Christ, really trying to get in alignment, right? So when you talk about betting on ourselves, as we get aligned with God, I believe, and what we believe, is that God will begin to reveal to you and to us the path to take. And sometimes you and I know he may not give the full picture from that first encounter with him.
Never gives the full picture. Never gives the full picture.
But sometimes he'll give just a snapshot.
Sure.
And the snapshot is the breadcrumb for us to take the next step, right? So, and a lot of times we talk about purpose and, now betting on ourselves. A lot of people struggle with wanting to know the full story, to determine what they're going to do. And being in the kingdom of God, it doesn't quite work like that, right? It's about the snapshot, responding to that snapshot or that incremental word.
Yes.
Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So again, there's a preceding obedience. There's a preceding path for us to take. And it's in those moments that over time, his plan, his purpose for your life will begin to be revealed. And then betting on yourself, it will begin to make more and more sense because then you'll see the bet or the wager that I'm placing, it's not solely for me,
Sure.
It's for him. And as we place the bet on ourselves, not only will it benefit and bless us individually, it will potentially bless people that are connected to us so that he can get glory. So, for me, that's how I think about this wager. And to your point, placing the right bet.
Yes. Yes.
Because if we miss God, we may place the wrong bet and end up somewhere that you didn't desire to be and he didn't desire you to be.
And one of the things that I say often is that no experience is ever wasted.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. As we talk about,
I hope some millennials and Gen Zs are listening up in this.
Yes. No experience is ever wasted. No experience is ever wasted.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about those starts and stops,
yeah,
and only being able to see one frame or maybe the end game, but can't see all the incremental steps in between.
Yeah.
There was some maturation, some development.
Yeah.
There was absolutely some things within my character that needed to be built up along the way so that when I got to wherever there was, that I wasn't just a rising star or a shooting star, I was able to sustain.
Absolutely.
And so when we talk about that process,
yes,
and Bishop Smith, I pass it home, we call it the dark room, right?
The dark room.
So when we talk about that developmental process, and the patience it takes in that process, what would you say to those that are listening and viewing that I understand what the vision is, and maybe I've seen it, but man, it doesn't feel good in this darkroom process, and it doesn't feel good with these steps that need to be taken along the way.
And you know, that's a great question and comment, because our culture is celebrating everything now, everything immediate. You know, you can buy followers, you can buy a following, you know, you can go viral in a moment, and now you're a global recording artist, right? That's what's happening. But none of that will circumvent the process, you know, and the process being that maturation and that development is critical to what you said about, you know, getting in certain rooms and being able to stay in those rooms because you got the goods, right? And, you know, what folks need to understand, you can't shortcut it. You know, you can't. And that's one thing, Jamila, I'll say about you and I. You know, we try and brand ourselves as lifelong learners. And the more we learn, the more we see what we have not yet learned.
Absolutely.
And it keeps us humble. It keeps us hungry. It keeps us driving forward, right? And I feel like some people that are on this path to getting into a place where they can bet on themselves, they have to just have that endurance and that stick-to-itness of being able to press on, you know, and you know, people think about the darkroom process, you know, everybody wants the fame, but you know, do you have the character to be able to sustain that stardom? Are we using a Gen
X reference talking about the dark room?
Probably. Why don't you break that down? Because some folks may not know.
Well, you know, back in the 1900s, when you used to have to process film in a literal room that was dark, that allowed for the chemicals for the film processing to bring the image from the film to life. And it required you to not only have the right tools in that room, but it was a period of time that you had to be processed, and you had to have the right stuff to bring the image forward. And any exposure of that film, any exposure, it was a dark room for a reason, any light or any exposure too prematurely would remove the image, would cause the image not to go forward.
That's a word right there.
We talk about the dark room, but that's very Gen X coded, as Willow would say.
That's true.
So we want to make sure that when we speak about the dark room, to those that are listening, we are talking about that time where the image or the end game is under development, where it's not quite exposed yet, where you know what that image is, you know what picture you're trying to bring forward, but it's not ready to see the light of day yet. And if you let it see the light of day too prematurely, that image will fade away.
But you know what? Let's have some fun right up in here, okay? Let's because again, let's get into this generational conversation, because millennials and some Gen Z, they have deconstructed the darkroom experience, right? They have tried to create an inverse path to say, no, I'm not going to sit in a cubicle for 15 years having somebody tell me what to do, only for me to then launch a business, you know, when they're in their 40s, right? After some of those, you know, earlier days. It's like they have pushed back on it, and you and I have had the conversation, and we've had a conversation with our children about you just can't skip to the end. You know, it doesn't work like that. What would you say, though, to that generation and those folks that say, nah, y'all, I'm not here in a dark room?
I'm not here in the dark room, and can I go be the CEO tomorrow? And can I?
Yeah.
and you and I talked about
Yeah.
it in the sense, you came up in construction project
Yeah.
management when you had to get certifications, and you had to have a
Oh,
certain
my
number of
goodness.
years. You had to
Yeah.
take a state exam and go through a certain amount of certification to be designated and use
Yeah.
certain titles
Yeah.
within the workplace, and all of those things. There is just an attempt to go past that. And what I would say to anybody, that there have been some things that have accelerated, but some things don't change. And so what you and I are finding, because now millennials are 40
Yeah.
and in their late 30s.
That's true.
And now they're having
That's true.
families. And so some of the things that might have gotten circumvented at certain stage, our mentor, Elder Kathy Moffitt, says it like this: everyone will have their childhood at some point.
True. That's true.
Everyone will have their moment where there is a time in which there will be some pressure placed upon you. And if you don't have what it takes to sustain and to go the distance, then you might find yourself with higher stakes,
Yeah.
but not have the fortitude
Yeah.
to be able
That's true.
to sustain yourself in a situation. So there is no way around it. And so you might have gotten there quicker, but can you stay?
That's true. That's true.
Is your character under attack once
Yeah.
you get there?
Yeah.
Do you know how to treat the people?
Yeah.
And develop the people? Can you duplicate yourself? That was
Yeah.
a big key for us. Even being in a corporate private sector, you know,
Yeah.
when I could get promoted, I can get promoted when I train someone
Work yourself
to
out of a
duplicate
job.
me. I
That's
had to
right.
work myself out of a position, and then also be in position to emulate my boss.
Yeah.
I had to be able to do my boss's job.
That's right.
And then also train someone to come behind me.
Absolutely.
And what did that teach? That was a long way around.
It was.
But what did that teach me? That taught me how to grow, develop, and mature other people. And then it taught me that once I got there, whatever the title was, or whatever the role, or whatever the position was, that I was already in position to be able to sustain it. And there is
Absolutely.
no way around that.
There it is.
There is no way around that.
So you have spoken on that, you know what I mean? And I think I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's how we've lived our lives.
Right.
And, you know, it's even interesting, you know, having, you know, college age children now
Yes.
and listening to their meditation.
We have almost 2 college
Yeah,
age children
I know.
now.
Yeah. Pray for us, y'all.
Yes.
But, you know, listening to their thoughts
Yes.
about, you know, what it looks like to go into the job force, and
Yes.
how long you're going to stay there. And, you know, some of, you know, our oldest friends, you know, they talk about wanting to be in consulting. And when I hear consulting, I hear one thing, but I think for them, it's something different, right? And, you know, we always talk about when you want to bring a product into the marketplace, it has to be good.
Yes.
Even if it's good, that doesn't guarantee success, but the product you bring, it needs to be good. It needs to be something that people want to consume and partake of. And sometimes getting that recipe right for whatever you're bringing to the market,
Absolutely.
it takes time. I'm just gonna, you know, we just got to keep it a buck and just say that sometimes it takes time. And that's, if there's anything I want this generation to understand, is that, right? We're not trying to hold anybody back. We're going to celebrate. We're going to have pom-poms, all of that. But I encourage them to go deep. It's just like, hey, we're filming in downtown Los Angeles right now. And for every high-rise building that are on either side, there was a tremendous amount of work that happened beneath the street to afford the vertical trajectory of the building. And I feel like
Go
our
ahead.
lives.
Let me ask the architectural engineer something, because you know he went to that good school. Let me ask the architectural engineer something. How deep does your foundation have to be
Oh, wow.
for
That's a
every
good-
building that stands
That's
up?
a good, and it really depends.
But
You
just
know
in
what I mean?
general.
But it'll be at least a third to 2/3, right? You may need to
Deeper.
be a third. You may need to, whatever vertical, you may need to be a third, right? And even that third below grade, there may be an extension from that third going in deeper. You see them driving these piles
Sure.
and these soldier piles and all this shoring and
So
and
let me ask you
underpinning.
this, for the dreamers out there, and for those that are entrepreneurial, and for those that desire to live these really full and robust lives, to take that same analogy, I've got to be in the dark room. I've got to have a foundation. I have to have a firm footing that is at least a third, if not 2/3 deeper than I intend to go higher.
And let's just say what it is, right? And we see some of these people's process play out in real time. We've been talking about Morris Chestnut.
Yes.
If we have some ladies up in here, they start screaming right now. But
we've been talking about Ricky. Go ahead.
But Morris Chestnut is now a main actor on major network television, primary actor on these dramas that he's a part of. But it didn't start in 2024 and 2025.
No.
We remember seeing Ricky, Boys in the Hood, and I think that was 1990, right? So over all these years, Morris Chestnut has built a cachet, and he's prepared for this moment.
Yes.
We saw him on the red carpet at some award show, and his stylist got him and his wife dripped.
Yes.
There's been countless years when he was not a primary star, and when his catwalk experience was something different. Now he's walked into his moment. But again, he had to build the work. And most of us in our community, we live where they ride around with the racks in the middle.
Yeah.
So most people can call Morris Chestnut's name, but he's now in front of a wider audience.
Yes.
Right? A wider audience that watches this major network. But again, he had to have his darkroom experience.
Absolutely.
He had to do all the small roles, all of the small films with small budgets to get to this moment, right? And now his gift is being presented in a wider platform. And you and I, we wholeheartedly believe in that, right? And one of our daughters is in the arts, right? And we're subscribing to that ideology for her and her career, and our oldest as well. So, but there's something to be said, and I know that we got on this page, but let's spin the block. Let's come back, and what I want you to share about betting on yourself. Can you give the listeners maybe 3 thoughts of what barriers they have to overcome to be able to bet on themselves? We talk about preparation now, but give us 3 gems.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first gem that I would share with the listener is really understanding what your individual sweet spot is.
That's good.
And Rufus, you talked about that just a little while ago, and you said, well, you have to be good at things, and then the market has to have a need for it. And to understand where your individual sweet spot is in terms of whatever it is you desire to bring forth, you have to, number one, be very, very good at it. Like real competent at it. I mean, doggone good at what it is that you do. Put the hours in, go to that good school, get the training, make that type of investment. And then the second thing about it is you have to be really passionate about it. It's not enough to be good about something, be good at something, because we know things are just hard. It is hard to go the distance. It is very difficult to stick with stuff and stick with things when barriers come in front of you. So you really have to be passionate about what you're doing. And the third thing I would say about finding that sweet spot is that there has to be a market for it. Someone has to want to consume it.
Come on.
And so sometimes we're really good at making crochet pot holders, but if there's no market for crochet pot holders, or if there's no market for the thing that we desire to do, then when we're talking about bringing that kind of passion forward, there's some difficulty in it. So thinking about what I'm really, really good at doing, what I'm passionate about doing, and then what there is a market for.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure what there's a market for doing, the market will teach you.
That's true.
When you and I first started doing this, our very, very first podcast was in our living room in Fairfield, California. Aunt Lo was behind a camera in the family room, and I was talking about HR principles. And really at that point, it was, they're not so interested in the HR principles, but I really enjoy seeing you on camera. And so that's when, that was the first time I started just talking about life, on camera, because the market gave me that feedback.
That's right.
So that's one thing, find your sweet spot. The other thing I would say that is a barrier to folks just really, really betting on themselves is thinking that I'm too old, I'm too young. I've experienced a divorce. I've experienced a setback. That life is for somebody else. That life's not for me. And so one of the things, and you talked about our children and you talked about their generation, one thing I will say that I always learned from them is that they taught me how to bet on themselves, on myself. Because one thing about Winter Simone and Willow Corinne, they are going to bet on themselves. They absolutely.
They'll do a photo shoot in a minute.
Listen.
Photo shoot in 2.8 seconds. What we doing?
Because I'm out here. But it's not only the photo shoots. And what I mean by they taught me how to bet on myself is that they dream in 4K. They have very vivid ways in which that they dream, that they approach the world. They don't know what's unavailable to them. And so in not knowing what's unavailable to me, everything is available to me. And so one of the things that you and I struggle with being adults that have gone through some life situations is we know that it can get real out here. And when you have been disappointed, when you have been hurt, when you have experienced grief and loss, those are some of the things that can allow us to then focus on, it's too late for me. That's a young man's thing. That's a young woman's thing.
Absolutely.
And sometimes even when you're too young, I bless God that we at least had this forethought when our children were younger. I think Winter started her first business when she was 12 or 13, and we said, yes, you can do that. You can absolutely do that. Gen Z wealth management. You want to talk to people about being a wealth manager and you're 12? Go for it. Willow released her first EP and started penning her first songs and owns her own publishing, and she's 16. And so we said, can you do that? Absolutely, you can do that.
Absolutely.
And so understanding that you're not too young, nor are you too old. There's so many people that have done studies with how old KFC was. I forget his name.
I was just reading that.
We were just reading about that.
We think about Steve Harvey
and all these people that much later in life had these experiences. And you're absolutely not too old for that. So that's another barrier. And then the third barrier is the resources conversation. Do I have enough money? Do I have enough time? Do I have enough education? Do I have enough of any of those things? And what I would say to anybody that is struggling with a resource conversation, do I have enough time, money, education, is guess what? When God is giving you the dream, that ain't your problem. And we say that with a smile on our face because that's where your faith walk comes in.
That's right.
Because anything that we have been lacking in terms of resources, opportunities, introductions, being in places and spaces with the right people, one thing that we have been assured when we are walking in the will and plan of God, that He will bring those resources to us by faith as we take those steps forward. We didn't get those resources standing on square one, on
That's
go.
Right. That's right.
the resources came when we took one step and then we met somebody that gave us this idea.
Absolutely.
We took another step and then we met somebody. I was in my 20s when you and I sat in the living room and somebody said, I got $30,000, Jamila. Tell me your dream. Tell me your vision. Tell me the biggest idea you have. I just want to invest in that. And that was a true story. And you know what I did, y'all? I didn't do nothing. I didn't know. Somebody came to me and said, I got $30,000 to invest in your dream. And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't have any idea with what to do with that, because I had never had anyone say, I want to invest in you doing you. I want to invest in you doing you. That was
Jerry Hinkle.
What's that?
That was Jerry Hinkle.
Jerry
right?
Hinkle.
Jerry Hinkle.
That was
Absolutely.
Jerry Hinkle. That said that to me. Shout out to Jerry Hinkle. On sticky chicken and ribs in Brentwood, California. Right. So if you see Jerry Hinkle, tell him I told this story. But that was Jerry Hinkle that said that to me. And so when you look at those things and say, well, what are the barriers, or what are some things? It's people that have difficulty identifying their sweet spot, that let the mindset of I'm too old, too young, I'm divorced. That isn't for me, get in the way. And then that real last piece of I can't start because I don't have enough. And really, it's a sticks before logs thing. It's starting where you are. It's a failing your way forward. And we say all those things that are cliches. You and I are filming this podcast here in downtown LA. Our very first episode, we recorded in a hotel room on some lavalier mics that we had hooked up to our cell phone, because it wasn't important. The how, it was the what. It was the what. And so how will change over time. If you baking cakes, you bake out the stove you have until you get the stove you want to have, right? Until you get the chef's kitchen and the commercial kitchen that you want to have.
Absolutely.
We had so many friends that started off washing cars out of, vans and out of, regular four-door vehicles, and then they got rigs, and then they got equipment as the building, as their businesses grew. And so I think that's just so important, to not be afraid to start where you are, and don't let that stop you.
Absolutely. No, those are great thoughts, great points. And, I feel like this is we in a dream studio today.
Always in a dream studio.
We didn't kind of step back in time, a little bit. And, I guess just kind of closing thoughts, what closing thoughts would you have, about this betting on yourself? I feel like the time in which we're having this conversation is critical, because I feel like so much of our culture is shaken up right now. There's so many, I feel like, needs that exist. And I feel like as we continue to go through these transitions and sometimes turmoil and chaos, that it's going to unlock and open the door for different needs being met. Right? And that's something I always think about when it comes to betting, right? Is I want to place bets that are going to help people.
Yes.
So I feel like this conversation is the right time and the right place. Even, these kids, it's graduation season. These young people are walking across stages, and they have to think about this degree that they have achieved. How are they going to use it to take care of themselves and take care of others, right? But just closing thoughts from you.
Well, my biggest closing thought really to the audience is to just reaffirm and to share with each of you that you are born with a very specific purpose. And there is something that only you can do in the earth realm. And so the thing that we're talking about stirring up, and the thing that we're talking about bringing forth, is really something that doesn't belong to you, but it belongs to the people that are assigned to you and attached to you. There are families in communities, in organizations, and people that are tied and absolutely connected to you walking out your specific purpose. There is someone that needs to live a different life because you have. And so it matters. It matters. You taking a chance to take that risk, especially since it isn't giving you no peace not to anyway. Like you playing it safe all this time hasn't brought you any peace. In fact, that's the thing that keeps stirring and keeps bubbling up, and year after year you keep trying to walk away from it, and it still is like a ball and chain just nagging at you and dragging on you. That is the thing that you're supposed to do. And so I want to encourage you to do it scared, to do it even if you don't have all the resources, to start even if you don't have all of the information, and to just understand that every time you take a step forward in purpose, and every time you take a step forward aligned with God's purpose and plan for your life, that He will be there every step of the way and will make sure that it will come to a fruitful and expected end. So, gotta bet on yourself.
Absolutely.
You gotta bet on yourself.
So with that, just want to thank you all for tuning in today. So excited that you joined us today in this studio, in this platform, and in this forum. We really appreciate all of the views, all of the listeners that we're getting. We're starting to see listeners and viewers pop up in different parts of the world. So we definitely want to give a special shout out to all of our supporters that are outside of the U.S. Definitely want to shout out our special delegation in South Africa that is holding us down.
The South African delegation.
Come on. We thank you. We appreciate you. And be on the lookout for our next episode. Hope you've enjoyed this. Yeah. Please share this with somebody that you know needs a word of encouragement, somebody that you know needs to bet on themselves. Until next time, I'm Rufus.
And I'm Jamila.
And we'll see you again next time on With Love, the Chambers. That's a wrap for today's episode of With Love, the Chambers.
We hope you laughed, learned, and felt encouraged along the way.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs a little love and wisdom today.
You can also connect with us online on all social media platforms at Rufus Chambers Online and at Jamila Chambers. We'd love to hear from you.
Until next time,
keep living, keep laughing, and keep learning with love, the Chambers.